This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I am really excited to welcome to you today somebody that I think we're going to learn an awful lot from. And he's already admitted he's going to possibly have some quite challenging opinions on things that I think we're all going to want to know about. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to you today Adam Bird, who is the CEO of Cronofy. Welcome to you today, Adam. How are you?
Hi, Alicia. I'm good. Yes, the sun's out. We always smile when the sun's out.
Always. Well, you're clearly not in the northwest then, because it's just grey as we record this today. But we have had the most horrific rain for the last 2 weeks, so the fact that it's actually a grey, dry sky is obviously very beneficial. But obviously, we're very, very excited to get to know you today and for our community to understand a bit more about what you do. So, without further ado, explain what Cronofy, who you are, and what you do.
Cronofy, what's the best way to describe Cronofy? It's the kind of technology that powers scheduling in hundreds of SaaS applications, and specifically in the recruitment space, we're powering the interview scheduling aspects of about 75 different applicant tracking systems. So really, we are the kind of industry experts kind of behind the scenes of like the intel inside for scheduling. And that's given us a really unique insight into how recruiters work and what their needs are and how the reality, scheduling in the real world, not just in the dreams of a product manager.
Wow, gosh, yeah, we've got loads to talk about today then, haven't we? And
Yeah.
we were just talking about off camera about the name Cronofy. I'm fascinated about things like this, maybe because I did classics at school. Talk to us about
Right.
Cronofy, what it means.
So we're all about time, and in many ways you could describe us as the API for time. So Kronos was one of the titans in Greek mythology, responsible for essentially time, all knowing. And it's also, Chron has become is kind of lent itself to a term within development and kind of systems engineering where you have a repeatable task that's done on a regular basis. So with the way we provide this sort of technical solution, we adopted sort of Cron as the way. And of course, it was about 10 years ago, so everything was a phi, so we made Cronofy.
Indeed, it was. Everything was a
It
phi back
was.
then. I'm not sure what it is now. It's more of an
Yeah.
ism. I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
you talk on your social media profile, LinkedIn profile, that you have a love-hate relationship with technology. Well, why is that?
Because I'm an optimist. I want to believe these things work. The kind of Apple idea of it just works, and it never does. And and for me, when it works, it's just magical and it just kind of goes away. But when it's not, there's nothing quite so kind of impotence inducing as it. I do remember Eddie Izzard's sketch about printing, and he was like, "Control P print. I can't see printer," and he was like pointing the monitor at the printer. It's like, well, there it is. It's like just and that
That's
epitomizes.
me.
It's
That's
like,
how I am.
well, yeah. And as a technologist, I kind of almost set myself up that I should be able to do these things and they should work. So when they work, I love it, and it's but I always, I was an early Palm Pilot user, and handwriting technology, and that's still not working, but I want it to work, and someday I will be able to write on something and it will just work out what I'm saying. So yeah, I set myself up for failure all the time just by being too optimistic.
So that chasm of where you love what you do and you've got this vision and you obviously have the technical capability being a software engineer, a software developer, beg your pardon. But then is it the user element of it? Is it that we're not using it properly, or is it just that it's getting the technology to get your vision out there for us to use?
Oh, in that regard, oh yeah, no. Every software engineer will tell you that everything works until users get involved. But in many ways, that's what I love about what I do. Is it's technology is just a tool. It's just a kind of means of delivering some kind of value. And actually, the exciting bit is getting under the skin of people and how they work and how they operate, and truly understanding the kind of real world. So certainly from a scheduling perspective, which is kind of what I've immersed myself in for the last sort of 8, 9, 10 years, there's so much push to automation. This idea that you can automate everything and then almost the people go away. And I think that's it kind of really misunderstands the actual complexity of scheduling in the real world. You may be able to automate 60, 70% of your screening calls, as an example.
Right.
But there's always that hiring manager who dutifully blocks out time in their calendar to make sure that they're available for interviews. But actually, that means that all of the scheduling tools break because it looks like they're unavailable. And so as a technologist delivering those kind of solutions, you have to accept how the real world works. And for me, that's the exciting bit. It's like, how do I harness this? I like to think of what we do as building a Lego kit.
Yeah.
And it's that other people can use to build their own kind of workflows or their own software. And very much my job is to try and help people map from the real world into kind of harnessing that technology. So I think very much in terms of streamlining workflows rather than automating workflows. I think automation is selling that optimistic dream, and when the rubber hits the road, it's never really worked that way.
No,
And
absolutely.
sorry, yeah.
But like you said, because things can change, can't they? And it's then making sure that you've got the flexibility, which I guess when you're developing software, you can't always plan for that, I suppose. So in terms of what you do, obviously you're very prominent in the recruitment industry very clearly. Where do you think the user, because obviously a lot of our listeners are the users day to day, what can we do better then to ensure that whether it's your technology or an ATS system, whatever it might be, what can we do? Because very often we're not tech savvy. We're trying, I guess we have to be with our phones and everything, but what can we do to ensure that we're not creating that chasm between you as the developer and us as the user?
That's it. So I think from my perspective, it's beholden on people like me to understand, people like you, really.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's but also I guess what you can do is don't believe people who say they can automate everything, and kind of push back on that and explain that, actually, so think of it like a plane on autopilot. Most of the time you can run on autopilot for a lot of things, but sometimes you need to take the stick, you need to go manual. There's always that kind of rescheduling flow, or that tricky thing, or that tricky client, or that tricky candidate that you have to work around. My job, or our job in this side of the fence, is to make sure that all of the other workflows work. So as a result of, say, a scheduling flow, interview ends up back in the applicant tracking system. Now, so you can then continue to do everything else. So I think I'm going to throw that back at you and say, it's not your job to kind of work with people like me. It's people like me's job to work with people like you, because actually, you wouldn't. I'm struggling for a simile, but we're just tool providers.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And getting into the mind of a recruiter is, you see those memes, don't you, where, imagine 27,000 tabs open at any one time. That's a recruiter's mind. That is literally how we work. So I think you trying to understand that and how to ease the flow of that, and to ensure, I think it's what I've just taken from what you've just said is that we as the recruiter shouldn't assume, and we should ensure that what we're doing, all the building blocks that you're giving us, which is what the analogy of the Lego blocks, you're giving us those blocks. We're not assuming anything. We're still doing our part, the human part, to ensure that everything is working as it should be. Speaking to the client, confirming those interviews, speaking to the candidate, confirming those interviews, circling back to our ATS system, because that way then we're utilizing it the best we can. And actually, that's doing your job properly. That's not cutting corners. That's what
recruiters are people. You wouldn't do what you do if you didn't like people, basically.
That's very true.
And our job is to provide you the tools. So all that admin and other stuff allows you to do the stuff you're really good at, and the stuff you can actually add value in the organization, putting your client's best face forward, really understanding the candidate and whether there is that match there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just want to pick up on something you've just said, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, because we were talking about this off camera and I'm really excited to talk about it. We are people. So what are your thoughts on how we're going to use all this technology, all this chatbot that is clearly going to allow, all this artificial intelligence, that we can write great copy, put it into our websites? What's your view on it, first of all? And where do you think this can take our industry? And is it a threat to recruiters? I want to know that as well.
So I think people are, like all new technologies, all new shiny things, people kind of are attributing kind of more intelligence to it than there actually is.
Right.
So if you look at that, the model for these things, actually all it's doing is taking a massive data set and providing a kind of version, a kind of a homogenized version of lots of data sets. So you want it to write an outreach email. There's data out there. It can kind of work out what are the common outreach emails work, and then you can start to train that. But ultimately, as a recruiter, you have to provide the prompt. You have to say, what do you want? The computer doesn't know what you want. And so that's the power. And there'll be a situation where, yes, certainly you can sort of, these kind of chat interactions that candidates can have, if they're pretty light and they, allow them to kind of do some screening calls in a kind of more chat type approach, and schedule an interview if they meet the various criteria. That's powerful and that's valuable, as long as the candidate will kind of know pretty much that there isn't someone on the other end of the line, and that's fine. Everyone's in agreement that they're not pretending to be anything they're not. But what you need to do is have a really smooth off ramp. So in that situation where you need to kind of move over to, this is a slightly exceptional situation that the AI just wasn't trained for or can't understand. It's those transitions, and that, I think, will speak volumes to the kind of employer brand and the way the candidate is seen, because everyone knows everything's got to be more efficient. But if at that off ramp point, if suddenly it all goes wrong and the candidate's left waiting for a week because no one's responded to them, then it's okay. Actually, this employer doesn't care. I'm not going to bother, because they're not interested in me as an individual.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So I think it's those transitions. So it's these things aren't intelligent. What they're doing is they're pattern matching, really, and creating patterns that we can infer. And in many ways, our minds are intelligent, are making the leaps based on what we're reading. Okay. We're kind of making inferences based on what we're reading because of the patterns that we've seen anyway. But to create those things, you need a recruiter. You need someone who understands the proposition, the role, the type of candidate that they're looking for. So yeah, it's like self-driving cars. General artificial intelligence is years away. And yes, it's exciting, and yes, it's there's some really interesting uses of that technology, but it's just a way of, in many ways, searching the internet and distilling it down to something that you can consume.
Which is already something that we're all doing anyway. And I think I saw something on LinkedIn the other day where somebody wrote, that we're not a threat by this AI. It's when a human being is using the AI, and it's about how we utilize that. This isn't here to replace it. It's so reassuring to hear that from somebody that is, you're coming at it from the other side of the desk. And most people listening on my side of the desk, we're recruiters are saying, how can we make ourselves more efficient? What we don't want to do is start creating an industry, whether you're recruiting, chefs, finance people, tech people like you, recruiters like me. We don't want to dehumanize any process, but we can use it to our advantage. But I think it's about, I love that you use the word homogenize, because when I'm maybe because I'm of a generation where, to me, it's all about human interaction. That's why I'm in recruitment, because I want to place people into the best jobs they can do, and I want to partner my clients. So, but I think we can marry up, we can utilize, don't be scared of this technology, and I'm really going to pinpoint how old I am here, that I've been in recruitment since before the internet was even a thing. I've been in it since the 90s. And, when job boards started, it was like, oh my God, recruitment agencies are going to die. That's it. We're screwed. Yeah. And funnily enough, we didn't die. We carried on, and we actually learned to utilize them, or not in my case, but in theory, multi-billion-pound sector. When LinkedIn, obviously it's been around for tech people for 20 odd years, but for recruiters, I think it probably started about 2008, maybe. That's when we started to think, oh, this is a great platform. Oh, LinkedIn's going to kill recruitment. And of course it hasn't killed recruitment. It's a recruitment database. That's what it is. So I think for me, you use the word optimist. I'm an optimist. I'm, all perpetually optimistic. And that's a whole different conversation. And for me, I'm not terrified by the thought of artificial intelligence replacing me, because of course it can't replace my nuances, my intuition, the passion that I have. It can try and mimic me, but it certainly can't replicate me or my instinct when I'm on the phone to a candidate about a client, and vice versa. So I think I'm really pleased we brought this up, because we didn't necessarily plan to talk about this, but I think it's really going to resonate in 2023. Don't fear change. What you need to do is embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. And recognize it for what it is. And in these kind of situations, it's a way of improving your efficiency to allow you to focus on the bits that differentiate us, which is the humanity.
Yeah, I'm so pleased we brought that up. That's wonderful. So I'm not asking you to pinpoint your age here, but you have been launching and growing your own companies for a very long time too, haven't you?
Yeah. Yes.
And We're just obviously on the right side of the Botox. Well, I haven't had Botox, but people aren't watching, they're probably listening. So you have done that, and you've obviously done that for a very long time too. So what would you say your biggest learns have been as you've launched businesses, in terms of whether it's hiring people, whether it's through seeing opportunity? Give us some advice, because we have a large swathe of our listeners are leaders themselves, or those who are aspiring to be leaders, thinking of launching. So we always like to get advice from people like you that have been there and done it.
My first bit of advice is don't take advice. I like the kind of, I was reading a book recently where they talked about kind of best practices are not best practices, they're useful fictions. Everyone's, there are kind of framework. Yes, there's some interesting ideas there, but you should be distilling that down to your own. And maybe that's just because I'm an old cynic, but actually in my experience, that really you have to really reflect on what other people are doing and distill it down to what makes sense for you. In terms of, there's two things I've learned about myself as I've gone through setting up and running and go through the business process. One is you have to look after yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And if you set yourself up for a sprint, then it's either got to work or it hasn't, and that might be fine. You may want to do that, but if you like, my mindset is trying to create something that's long lasting, that actually has some value to society and community, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. So, and you can't do that sprinting. It's just something you have to do, and you have to get up every day, and it's kind of relentless, but you find that balance, and that's about friends, family, and making sure you're enjoying it all the time. Absolutely. So I think there's that kind of personal well-being, and if you're not in a good shape, your business is not going to be in good shape, and your interactions are not going to be in good shape. So definitely, okay, so I've just given some advice, but take it as you see it. The other side, I think, and one thing I absolutely learned in with my different between my last company and this company was about being very, very deliberate about culture. Okay. So in my last company, the kind of culture just happened. And it was fine when we were small, but I think when I left, we were about sort of 60, 70 people. Wow. And I realized I couldn't, part of what the reason for me to move on was I just couldn't affect change in the organization anymore, because there was the culture was just kind of coalesced around a mean, rather than me being intentional about how we should be operating. So what I've done with Cronofy is, from the start, is very much thinking in terms of, okay, well, how do we provide a framework for people to behave and make decisions and give them that autonomy? And I'm a big advocate of, I think I struggle with the term values. So lots of companies have values. So these are our values. This is who we are. My issue with values is they're inherently kind of judgmental. That if you don't conform to my values, you're somehow less than me. Because of course we have religious values, political values. We don't agree, and at a kind of almost a foundational level, if we're talking about values. Whereas I prefer to use the term principles. Okay. So the principles described the method, the way we behave, and the way we confront, the way we kind of make decisions about things. So one of our core principles is everything above board at Cronofy. So no matter how tricky it is and how uncomfortable it is, we always start with the truth. Customers, internal, everything. And yes, we have to kind of navigate that, but that's a principle of operation, and that's nothing to do with values. And the benefit of having these principles is we're talking about how I behave, not how I think. Yeah, I like that. And that's super important, because actually it allows you to have a far more diverse organization, because people value different things and they see the world in different ways. But if you all agree a way of behaving and a way of operating, then you can coexist and you can work together and be far more successful together. Don't lose your train of thought, but I'm just going to interject, because that's a really important point for hiring. It is far, I don't want to say easier, but it's more quantifiable to hire against behaviours than it is against values. Because how do you demonstrate honesty? How do you demonstrate integrity? How do you demonstrate quality? It's actually really hard to. I can say all those things. I've got integrity, but how do you demonstrate it? It's through behaviours. And I really wanted to pick up on that quickly,
because it's so important. Because I think I agree with you. I mean, I talk about values, but to me, I always talk about a value add. And actually, maybe that's this conversation. This is my next stage of my building block, that actually it's around behaviours. It's how somebody makes you feel by the actions that they take and the behaviours that they demonstrate, not the values that they're supposedly got on their walls. So I'm sorry to break your train of thought, but I had to pick up on that.
Yeah.
It's so important, given our
No,
audience for all hirers and hiring people.
and I think by articulating its principles, it's helped us in our hiring process, because we can look for evidence of behaving in that way. And that's, and so we've done a lot of work with my head of talent around a competency framework, and that competency framework is basically derived from the set of principles. Yeah, there's capabilities you have to have, but you have kind of individual and collective competencies as well, which are very much kind of principles driven in the way you interact and the way you operate.
I like that.
The other thing is they're not fixed.
Okay.
So it's not like once and done. We are on about a 4th or 5th iteration of our principles. We did another set recently, because companies evolve. As we've kind of grown the team and added more people and different influences, and we want to do different things. And certainly what we're doing as a company at the moment is we are transitioning from being this kind of underlying technology provider, this API provider to other software companies, to actually providing end user tools directly to a lot of recruiters.
Right.
So actually a kind of tool that you can just use from Gmail, from Outlook, from Smart Recruiters, from Greenhouse, all those kind of toolings, to allow that to allow scheduling. Now, what that's changed is the type of customers that we're interacting with and the type of people that we need to understand. Now, we were very successful with product managers at applicant tracking systems, because we knew we had to understand who their customer was in order to provide value. Now we have to kind of understand the customer really deeply, directly, and change that mindset. So what we've done in terms of the way the principles of work, we've actually think, well, we got through the pandemic, and we did really well as an organization to get through the pandemic, and our principles were great during that situation. But we ended up coming out the other side a little comfortable and a little complacent. And it was nice and warm, but I realized that actually, you know what, our aspirations are bigger than this. And nothing in our principles were really talking about high performance. It was about kind of supporting and trustworthy and delivery, and being a great place to be empowered to work. But we weren't explicitly saying, well, and we introduced the principle, customers decide. Right. This kind of clear thing that actually we're only here because customers are choosing to use us. So we have to recognize that and think about that in the way. And this isn't customer is always right. Actually, one of the iterations of the principle had customer isn't always right, but we thought that was a bit contentious to stick on our website. But but ultimately, our job is to become experts and to share that expertise and enable people to kind of be better at their jobs by using the tooling that we provide. And so framing everything we're doing in terms of that. And so this evolution of the principles is super important, because, and it has to be a collaborative effort. So it's a whole company effort. It's not just some, I'm not coming down from Sinai with the tablets and going, there you go, they're your principles now. It has to be a collaborative effort, and that way you get absolute buy-in. And people are, when they join Cronofy, they're like, oh, actually you meant it. You actually do live by these principles. This is a true thing.
I love the evolutionary aspects of that, because I think as well, you mentioned, a phrase that gets overused an awful lot, but we're really passionate about diversity and inclusion. And in order to truly be inclusive and truly be diverse in how you're hiring in people into your business, you have to adapt those principles, because they're going to change as you bring new people into your business. We do not want to encourage clone style recruitment of any kind. So I love the evolutionary aspect of it. It makes it very visual for me. I really like that. I think a lot of people will copy this. I really do. Plagiarize away, guys. Do it.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I've written a small blog post on the view over principles and values, so I'll share a link.
Oh yeah, do definitely. I mean, obviously, when we share this episode, we'll be sharing your profile. So if that's, I don't know if that's in your featured or if it's somewhere quite prominent, but we'll make sure there's a link to that, definitely, because I think that by changing the mindset of how we as leaders and listening now, if you're a recruiter, it's about your actions, it's about your principles, but we're always changing, we're always learning. It's all about that Kaizen continuous improvement mentality that I'm very keen to encourage all recruiters to have. just because it's been done one way before doesn't mean it's right continually forevermore.
Yeah.
You know, I really love that. This
And
is
also
really good.
being deliberate about that change. And I think that's the important thing, is being kind of, you know, conscious and deliberate about the change that you're making. And therefore it's not just letting it happen, because you can end up down a, you know, a cul-de-sac. And as an organization, it's very hard to kind of move an organization once it goes too far. So that's, as a leader, your responsibility is always to feel the pulse and how the organization is operating, and understand whether you have to course correct.
Yeah, no, I do. I think, but there will be plenty of people that are working for companies. So maybe this is one for recruiters working for companies, where you're looking up at your leadership team and thinking, we haven't changed in the last 5 years. You know, there's not been any adaptation, or you know, just being receptive to our ideas. And I love the idea of collaboration as well, that people coming in going, wow, it's real. It's real.
Yes.
We get to have a voice. I look, honestly, Adam, I can see, and you're a mentor for skills in Nottingham as well. I don't want to finish this podcast without talking about that, because clearly you can see that you ooze mentorship, because you're so happy to impart your advice, and tell us a little bit more about that.
I've just, you know, I've just kind of, years ago, I set up a networking event called Not Tuesday in Nottingham, and it was really weird. It was like 2009, I think, and it was during my last company, because I realized actually I kind of didn't know anyone else kind of in the scene, and it was you just kind of get to know, and actually providing this kind of forum for people to collaborate. And you know, I'm no longer involved in that side of things, but what that's done is given me access. I guess I like sharing what I do, and I hope people, and what I try and be is, as a mentor, is start thinking about questions. I try and ask, it's about asking the right questions. And for me as a leader, that's super useful, because it forces me to, oh, I should probably ask myself that question. What's my answer to that question? Oh, actually, oh, hold on. Yeah, okay, you know, glass houses and all that. So but that's a really, it's really, really valuable for my own career development. Absolutely. And hopefully it gives value to other people. So I especially because, you know, I've made Nottingham my home, and over 25 years ago I came here, something like that. But yeah, we've got my kids, companies, everything is Nottingham. I went to university here and forgot to leave, basically. That's the story.
Oh, lovely.
And
city.
yeah, but it's also, my job is, yeah, okay, so I have I'm very lucky to have set of kind of skills and proclivities that allow me to be successful. That absolutely, that so therefore my role in society is to provide a supportive, developing working environment that allows people to be successful, to pay my taxes, to give to the local community, so other people can benefit. That's my job in society as a whole. And it pains me then when other business leaders see it very much as, how much can I take for me personally? And it's this complete antithesis of the way I think. To be a successful country, to be a successful society, people like me everyone should be contributing back in different ways, but reflect on the luck. And you know, I'm successful because the country provides me educated people who are healthy and feel safe and can get around. That's what I pay taxes for.
Absolutely.
So that's where, it's kind of inbuilt in me that we, as successful, you know, successful people, should be explicitly giving back to society, because that drives success for everyone.
Totally agree.
And so it ends up on a little bit of a rant.
No, it's not. And I know it's not altruism. This is, you know, philanthropy, whatever connotation you want to give it. I could not ask for a better reason why I do the podcast, why I do what I do. We need more people like you in leadership roles, because you are setting the example, because that's exactly what we should be doing. You help people on the way up, you support people, you share best practice, because it does not take any shine from you. It's giving people that opportunity, and that's for me what we should all be doing. And what a wonderful place to finish the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights today, Adam. It's been we've kind of swerved with lots of different topics, but I think I have no doubt we will have people that will find an awful lot of value in this. So I really appreciate you joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Lisa.